real vibe, got the 1942 pouring in my cup. In the session, real loud, good gas, yeah, you know we about to roll it up. Bring the bottles to the session, big tab, go ahead and just live it up. Get lit one night, after that, we can go ahead.
What's going on? What's going on? It's your boy Iconi, and we're here on 95 South Podcast. Once again, I want to thank God for this opportunity to be able to come on here and, you know, be with my brother and our special guest that we have on here almost every week. And, you know, just to be able to chop it up and talk about things that's important in the community. What's going on, my brother?
What's happening? What's happening, man? We on this side of the dirt. So as the old man say, we can keep on trucking. You know what I mean? We can keep on trucking. Okay. We on this side of the dirt. Remember, everybody ain't blessed to be on this side of the dirt. Everybody ain't lived through the pandemic. So we definitely blessed.
You're right. So what we're gonna do? I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce this young lady, and go ahead so we can get this thing going, and inform the people what's going on.
All right, we have none other than Miss Ebonie Williams. She is a professional, licensed counselor. She works with, mental health, emotional health, and she also worked with substance abuse and rehab. So we're blessed to have her, and shout out to Patrick Solomon for definitely plugging us with her, man. Shout out to P, a very good friend of ours, and we just blessed to have her. So today's topic, I want to talk about, behavioral health and emotional health. And so with that being said, Ms. Williams, how are you?
I'm fine, and thank you for having me. How are you all doing this morning?
Good. Doing well. Thank you for asking. So, what made you want to get into the field that you're in? Like what lit that fire up onto you, and with you being so passionate, about one's mental capacity?
Long story short, I grew up from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up around nothing but addiction and poverty, and at that time I didn't really know it was poverty. Everybody around me lived the same way, so I didn't know any different. But fast forward 20 years, I moved to Kentucky, and I ended up working at Warren County Day Treatment, and I ended up working with some disadvantaged youth. And one day, my counselor at the time put me to the side and told me, "This is what you need to go in. You're already doing the work." I understood them. For the first time, I was able to see how I was supposed to get back after everything that I had been through, the things that I've seen. I felt like I was in the right place at the right time, and I could get back. And my thing was, I could be there for them in ways that I needed people to be there for me that couldn't be. And so it just sparked something. And I've been doing it ever since, over 10 years doing this. And it's one of those fields where you don't see your success up front. Some people, if you work with money, the more money you make, the success you see, but you don't see success like that with us. The success with us is helping them to just improve their lives and being able to get through certain things.
Okay. And so with that being said, people say, well, Jacob, when we grew up, we was hard-headed, we was bad, but they said this youth now, the generation of now, is on a whole different level.
Most definitely.
I said, well, I can't say about nobody else, but I know that, even the people, like, I grew up in a 2-parent household, but even my friends who grew up in a single household, it's certain stuff, but they want their mama to find out. You know what I mean? Like these kids now, for one, they get their parents word for word. I mean, I just don't know where that come from. We don't do none of that.
They were different than we were, though. We were raised with parents who protected us and who wanted to shelter us and who were afraid of the world that we were living in. The kids that are coming up now, their parents are not afraid of the world that they're living in. They're not afraid to challenge and to speak up. And it's a different set of boundaries. A lot of you have to recognize now, when we were coming, grandparents were 60 and 70 years old. Now you have grandparents that are 30s and in their 40s and maybe in their early 50s. So what you have is babies babies having babies and growing together. So the kids are seeing the same trials and tribulations that their parents are experiencing. And because they're not being sheltered and they have to survive that, they don't necessarily have that same type of respect for them that we have for our elders because we didn't see everything that our elders did. You know, you heard about Mr. Willie being an alcoholic on the corner or the trouble that he was having with his wife, but you didn't see it because it happened behind closed doors.
Right. I understand what you're saying. So, with that being said, you as a counselor, how do you identify the certain levels of behavioral health when it comes from a kid, when it comes from a teenager, when it comes from an adult, or even when it comes from an older person that's just been battling their whole life?
Okay, so some of the things that you have to recognize is when you're dealing with something, age has something to do with it. It's the mentality of the person. And it's also about what coping skills they've been able to develop and where they are. One of the key things for me being a therapist is not to come into the situation and saying I'm an expert, but it's to say I'm here to help you on your journey, help you figure out how to make the changes in your life. Because truth be told, as a therapist and a counselor, I don't have any power. The power lies within the client because they have all the power to change their dynamic, their situation. So my job is to empower them and to teach them and to show them how to be able to develop some skills to be able to change their situation, regardless to what it is. So let's say you're ADHD or you suffer from depression. So it could be genetic, it could be something that you've been suffering with your whole life, or it could be situational induced. So you have to look at it. It's not necessarily a straightforward answer because what you have to do is you have to assess each client one-on-one. And then based on what they present with is how I address it. So let's say you have a natural chemical imbalance that causes your depression, right? It's not situational. So at that point, after assessing you, maybe it's time for some medication. But let's say your depression, your depression is situational because you just got laid off. And so that's why you have depression. So now we need to look at other ways to help you get over that. And maybe it's to find another job, looking at changing careers. So you can't look, it's not a one size suit fits everybody. And that's the thing that people seem to forget is that everybody's different. And it's based on what you come in with, how I help you. And if you allow me to help you, because one of the key aspects about therapy is every therapist ain't for everybody.
So okay, so I'm gonna shoot for one more question, then I'm gonna hand it over to you. So I heard you say generational when it comes to depression. So how does that work for it to depression to pass from generations to generations, and how does one break that curse?
Me and my cousin talk about this all the time when we are on the phone. We talk about how the fact that we broke our family generational curse. And it becomes with you doing the work, recognizing that just because this is what you grew up in, it's not what you're limited to. I tell people all the time, the only difference between me and some of my family members and some of the people I grew up with is I didn't want to give in to it. I was scared of it. And that's what deterred me. We had the same situations, grew up in the same household, the same neighborhoods, but they went a path that I didn't go. And so that's part of the other part is genetics based on who your parents are. If you're predisposed to certain things and certain things happen to you, it's easier for you to cave into that. Okay, so if let's say, for example, both of your parents are addicts, right? Technically, somebody would say you're predisposed to being an addict. But guess what? The only way you want to become that addict is if you ever pick up the drug to use it in the first place. If you never use it, then your chances of becoming an addict are 0 to none, pretty much, right? But if you use that drug, your chances of becoming an addict are more increased because the fact that both of your parents are predisposed to have used it, and now it's in your genes, especially if your parents your mother was using it while she was carrying you.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Thank you for that. I'll come back to you.
So I myself, I used to be a youth counselor years ago, and the one thing that always used to frustrate me more than anything was when you're dealing with the youth and you're dealing with the parents. You go into the homes and the parents don't want to do the work. You know what I mean? They didn't want you to be coming there. They want you to be, you know, the teacher, the counselor. They want you to be the mother, the father. They want you to be everything to this child. But then when you come to them and say, well, mom, dad, whoever, you have to do this or whatever, you have to do certain exercise with your child, and you have to do certain things, because it's really kind of build that bond back up between that family. It's almost like you have to rebuild the family.
It's
But
a
they don't get it. You know what I'm saying? So when you go in the home, are you seeing the same thing? And if anything, is that part of your frustration at times when you don't see the improvement in the child and in the home?
Well, for a therapist, we understand that it's never just one person; it's the system. So if you have a child in a household that's dysfunctional, that household dysfunctional. So everybody has to be treated, and that's a lot of that very thing that what you just said is. You go into a household and they want you to fix that child. Well, the first thing you have to get everybody to recognize is stop identifying that child or that person has the problem. Because guess what? We're all human, so we all make mistakes and we all have issues. You may be dealing with that particular child in a way that child's not healthy that's not healthy for that child. And you may be dealing with that child like that because of your own trauma.
Okay. So when you're dealing with somebody that's on drugs and alcohol and battling that, because I know, like, because the counselor, the counselor center I work for, we dealt with both. We dealt with the youth and we dealt with drug and alcohol patients. Also, so I had the best of both worlds as far as like dealing with both. And but it was kind of a strict program. So if you relapse after like 30 within that time, they have the choice either kicking you out or making you kind of start all over and all this kind of stuff. So for you, what's kind of like your cutoff point for you? Like, what is it? Do you have to see a certain amount of improvement? You know what I mean? And like early on, or is it something one of those things where if you kind of can see the light and you keep trying to work with the person until you kind of really start seeing a breakthrough?
Okay, so two different answers to that. I'm currently the executive director at a rehab. So I run an inpatient short-term rehab, and we have this a program for a PHP. So for that particular program, they're not allowed to use inside the program because as you come into it as an inpatient, you're not supposed to use. Now, on a rare occasion where we have a client able to sneak some drugs in, and they get caught, if they didn't pass the drugs to anybody, then we would lengthen their stay and increase the type of therapy that they're doing, because the whole point is getting them off the drugs to begin with. But if I was in the outpatient setting, if I had outpatients and they've been clean and then they relapse, so let's say they've been struggling and they were on methamphetamines and then they get off meth, and so now maybe they're using weed. Well, I not necessarily going to stress the marijuana as much. Still going to stress it because the whole point is to get them to be abstinent and not have to use any drugs. But I'm not going to recommend them go back to an inpatient facility. We might have to step it up and find out what the triggers are that making them want to use in the first place. But if I have someone, let's say, was on opiates, and this is something that is very common in the situation that we're dealing with now. So you have a lot of people who are getting addicted to opiates, fentanyl, and things of that nature. Well, then they go to treatment, they get off treatment, they get on medication, and which is an MAT drug, and then they go back home, and then they're stable for that for a while. Well, then in the process, they end up getting attached to meth because it's a different type of drug and it affects the body differently. So for that situation, that person would be recommended to go back into treatment, because even though you're taking an MAT drug and you're using the same drug that you wasn't using the same drug you were using before, you switch drugs now. So that tells me that whatever the underlying issues are still haven't been fully addressed. And one of the basic things that I believe people miss when it comes to addiction, yes, addiction affects every facet of life, a population, I mean. And it doesn't matter whether you're old, young, rich, or poor, but it mostly affects the disadvantaged and socially economic challenged people, right? So guess what? I can't change my people, my places, and my things, because I may have to live with my auntie who makes smoke and drink every day. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand all the dynamics that just go into that, and how to be able to help them. So sometimes we have to recommend that clients don't go back home. You may have to ask them, okay, who can you go live with? Can we get you into a long-term program somewhere else? because your environment isn't conducive to you living a healthy, sober life.
Mm.
Sober, and when we say sober, it just means that you're not using any drugs that's going to deter your life. Some people have a concept of you shouldn't use any MAT drugs, or you should be completely abstinent from everything. It's all about enhancing and helping somebody's healthy quality of life. There's a lot of research now being done into CBD with anxiety and psychedelic drugs to help decrease anxiety and depression. So the more we learn about how these things affect us, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
Oh, I got two more questions. I'm gonna hand it back over to my brother. One, over the years, the drugs seem to keep getting stronger and stronger as far as the severity of it and the way it's impacting people. So what has been your biggest concern over the years that you've seen with the whether it's the meth or the whatever they putting in it with the fentanyl and all this other stuff that's going on? So what is your biggest, or your people, you and your people, at the center and where you work at and the type of work you're doing, what's y'all biggest concern, or what y'all seeing that's impacting the people in their community and the families?
It's the feeling of a lot of people come in and it's the feeling of being trapped. They don't have another way out. It's what everybody around them is doing. It's what I'm stressing one day, so my family's somebody I know is introducing me to this. And it's because they don't have a way out, so they introduce somebody, because this is their coping skill, they introduce it to somebody else. So one of our biggest concerns is giving people hope again. Letting them see that just because you were raised in this environment and this is just because this is all you see around you, doesn't mean that this is what you're forced to deal with. Because we can't change the drugs. The biggest difference between the drugs when back then and when our parents were coming up and where we are right now, those drugs were natural for the majority of it. Cocaine, marijuana, those things, mushrooms, mostly all natural. Now everything is being man-made and created, so it's in the lab. One of the things that I often talk about when I'm talking with clients, if I'm doing a group, is saying, go to my car, get some battery acid, go out in the field and get me some ammonium hydroxide oxide and shoot up in your veins. They look at me like I'm crazy. I says, but that's exactly what you're doing when you're using meth. Those are the chemicals that go into it. So what's the difference?
Wow.
Wow. Go ahead, Jacob.
Well, so we talk about, a lot of different type of health. So, and depression, of course. So I just want to hit on levels of depression. Family depression, church spiritual depression, and I also want to hit on educational depression. Because kids can be educationally depressed, for one. So we'll start with the family first, and how family depression affects, a child in their siblings, and it just affects it for a lifetime. And so, what are some of the symptoms that you see when you talk to people, and you know that they've been family disbarred, family damaged, and their family depressed?
So let's get with a single mother who's raising young children. Okay, so let's start with that. So she's the sole provider, or even a grandmother, or any single parent. They're the sole provider. Let's say they have 2 or 3 kids. They have rough days. They have to go to work and they have to come home and they still have food and they have to deal with all this and they still have to provide for the kids. So let's say it was a hard day at work and the boss has just been ragging them. The hours have been cut. They don't have enough food. She doesn't know how she's going to take care of all this, but she has nobody to lean on. That will give you some symptoms of depression. In just a general way, right? So let's say because she doesn't have any support, she doesn't have an outlet, she's crying. She's not necessarily motivated to get up to do anything. So then she's not taking care of herself. So guess who else she's not taking care of?
The kids.
So because she's not meeting her own needs, she can't meet their needs. So now they sink into the depression because as little kids, they see something's wrong with mommy. So what do they start doing? They start worrying about her, or they start acting out. Or
Right.
maybe, depending on the age, maybe the older one or the middle one, because sometimes it's the middle kid, picks up the slack.
Okay.
And even though they're being more mature, their growth is also being stunted.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes
And
sense. So what are
that's
the cures? Like from what you see from your standpoint, how have someone like yourself or someone of your stature been able to help change the narrative of that single parent is going through, or that child even don't feel like they're being loved by their parent?
it goes back to that. It takes a village. When you see it, a lot of times with our relationships as a therapist, when I'm working with young kids, it's not just about asking them what's wrong, but it's about showing them that love, that affection, that empathy, that sympathy, and genuinely being there for them. So
Okay.
giving that child that support that they're missing sometimes can balance that out to give them enough to be able to overcome those things. I'm sitting
Mm.
here because I had enough support with my great grandparents that they picked up the slack that my parents lacked in.
Mm.
That was the difference between me and some of my family members and me and some of the people that I grew up with. It wasn't because I had some rich family or because my parents didn't do certain things. No, they did certain things. It's just that I had other people that gave me enough support. There was never a person in my life that says you need to go to college.
Mm.
Mm.
There was never a person in my life. My only requirement for my mother, truthfully, was that I graduate high school.
Mm.
I went to college to escape because I wanted something better for myself. But again, it
Okay.
still comes down to that individual. You have to have that drive. You have to want to change your circumstances. We all experience some type of trauma in our lives. We all do. But it's up to the individual person to understand that it's up to you to change your situation. No one else can do it for you. So that's when it comes back to having hope and faith that my continuous effort and working on myself is going to improve my situation long term.
Okay. Sound good. Sound good. So from that, a lot of people don't like to talk about this. They be like, man, why you always be talking about the depression in the church and the depression in the spiritual community? I said, man, you ain't never set up in church, and you seen the lady sitting on the second pew to the right, and she always mean mugging, and she always got that look on her face, and she
Mhm.
just ready to go off on the pastor for no reason because he ain't meet his obligation with these kids. I was like, it's a lot of disbarment and spiritual depression in the church, and so they try to separate the Christian from the church folk, and we just see him every fourth Sunday and sister so and so,
That
so I feel like a lot of people in the congregation are depressed.
most
They they
definitely.
they spiritually depressed. And so if you can comment on that, and you need to comment on that too, man, after you get through.
So first, let's understand that there's a difference between going to church, having a religion, and being spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Three totally different things, right? Because
Uh-huh.
for all different reasons.
Right.
When I was little, I didn't like going to church, and then when I did, it was because I wanted to play with everybody and see my cousins and them, but they was gonna cook something good. And then as I got older, it was more about trying to apply the word.
Uh-huh.
It was like, okay, how do I live by this? Because that's what we're taught, that I have to live a certain way in order to make it into heaven. Now where I am in my stance, I understand that my connection with my higher power, with my God, is not determined by a preacher or a pastor or anything. It's determined by my relationship to him and how me and him communicate.
All right.
Okay. And how I'm my I allow myself to be centered in my spirituality and how I guide my principles and my morals and how I vision him. And I think that one of the biggest concepts is, at least for me growing up, and I grew up at old school primitive Baptist, where they believed in washing the feet and things of that nature. Um, it was very strict. It was a very black and white situation. You do this, you don't do that. You live this way, you don't live that way. There was no gray. And you were supposed to pray a certain way. You were supposed to sing a certain way. You're supposed to act a certain way. You had to show up a certain way. And anything out of that was completely shut off. And you had to fit a certain mold. And so I believe when it came to that being the church, right? So then when you get in, so that's the church, you have to show up and appear a certain way. And then the religion says you're supposed to worship and you're supposed to have these morals, because the Bible is a book of stories about morals and values. At the end of the day, it's a book of stories about morals and values and how you're supposed to treat somebody else. And it's about, and you don't know this, when I was in college, I took Old Testament and New Testament. So I have a little bit better understanding. Those stories were written for those people dealing with those times and those situations. It wasn't written for us in these times and these situations. So the problem. Okay, go ahead.
But Emily, as you look at the Bible and you read scriptures and stuff like that, a lot what's in there talks about what's happening now. You know,
like I can apply anything to it. And don't get me wrong, I like the Bible. One of my favorite scriptures is Luke. Chapters is Luke. Books is Luke in chapter 11. But my thing is, the people who wrote the Bible were men. And and with that, just like with history books, you can skew it to say and do whatever you want to do, depending on the outcome that you want. And that's what some people do with the Bible now. And that's why it doesn't have the same power that it used to have, is because people take it and use it to their disadvantage to try to make the other people who don't necessarily live the way that they want them to live and discard them. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, Jesus talks about loving everybody, you know, and thee without, you know, sin cast the first stone. But when they find out that you're gay, gay or lesbian, all of a sudden it's a big problem. You're going to, but you got a pastor in the pulpit cheating and being adulterous. But you want to tell somebody else not to be gay or lesbian.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's definitely a double standard. If you're gonna live right, just live right. You know what I mean? Like, period.
Yes, but here's the thing: who is to say what is to live right? Because we all sin, we all make mistakes, right? So if me living right means that I don't purposely go out my way and try to harm anybody, but I'm always trying to help others, at some point in life, because you can't please everybody, unintentionally, I'm gonna make somebody mad. Not because I was trying to, but just because in me doing how I think, I'm going to do and carry actions a certain way that's going to make me feel good about myself, and I feel like it's going to improve my life. Well, just because I do that, it may make somebody mad. Well, guess what? Because it made you mad, does that mean that I'm not doing the right thing? Does it mean that I'm not living my life right? No, it doesn't. I just made a decision that didn't benefit you or go the way that you wanted it to go. But it made me happy overall.
Yeah, because I'm gonna say this, like, me personally, I'm one of those people, like, I grew up, I didn't grow up in that strict, like, churchy type environment, because my granddaddy was a Methodist, my mom was a Baptist, my grandmother practiced Jehovah's Witness. And when I say practice, because she didn't ever join until, like, it was crazy, she practiced probably my whole entire life, but she didn't join until like 2-3 years before she passed. When she was like, so she practiced it probably for 40-50 years, but for whatever reason would never actually join till like right before she passed. But so I've seen different types of, I've seen it all. I've seen how each religion, like you say, how they do things. And so by the time I got older, I was more confused than I was understood exactly how to do things. So I was one of those type of people where I moved around a lot as far as different churches, trying to figure it out, because the first time I actually got into an environment where, you know, I was around, you know, I ain't gonna put out what it was, but when I first finally got into the environment where I was going to church on a regular, behind the scenes, these people wasn't nowhere near what they was portraying in the church. Mm-hmm. So it made it even worse for me. So from there, you know, it's like I'm church hopping, because like you said, when you hurt and you seeking something spiritually and you seeking some kind of breakthrough, you hopping around trying to figure it out. And every time you meeting somebody, they flawed, and you don't. And then it took me a long time to realize, oh, these people gonna be flawed just like me. Some of them gonna be more flawed. So you know what I'm saying. So to me, I got to get a relationship with God myself. I can't be relying on my preacher or my deacon or whoever to do that for me. I got to do this for myself. And then once I do it for myself, then I can embrace everything else that's going on around me and not be judgmental about what I'm seeing or what's going through, because we all coming into these gates spiritually broken and depressed, or something's going on with us. That's why you hear about preachers killing themselves. That's why you hear about certain things going on, because you know, because at the end of the day, the whole world is flawed. And the one thing my pastor said last week, and he harps on this a lot lately, is that since the pandemic, when people couldn't go to church anymore, and then they made it harder for people to go back. Now, society, the government made it harder for people to go back to church. They let you go to the Walmart, they let you go to the movie theater, they let you go to games that's going to be 50,000 people. But with the church, oh, well, you can only have this amount of people in here. Oh, you can only stay in for an hour. So now, a lot of people made excuses not to go back to church, and they probably need that spiritual gathering and more than they did ever before. You know what I'm saying? But they like, oh, well, they make excuses they make every excuse not to go. So that's what I've seen over the last, over my lifetime in the last couple of years.
Our lives have become so based upon convenience. Mm-hmm. Everything. Like, oh, I don't have to physically up and go to church no more, because guess what? I can open up my computer and see it on my phone and join right there.
Mm-hmm.
Not forgetting the fact of it was more about being in the same place at the same time and worshiping and communing together. That was part of it. When I was younger, I didn't necessarily go to church to hear the word, but when I went to church and the choir would sing, that would touch me. My spirit would get touched, because it was something about being in there, and something about sitting next to somebody else who you seen getting the spirit or getting something out of it. Sometimes that would come on to you, and you would start to feel something and feel that connection and that emotion. And that goes back to the spirit, and that doesn't go back to either the spirituality or the religion. I mean, to the church or to the religion, but goes to the spirituality, because spirituality is about the energy, right? It's about that energy and how you feel. So you can feel that transpiring. So if I'm at home and my energy in my house is screwed up, it's still gonna be screwed up, whether I'm attending church through the computer or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I need to get out of that mind frame. I have to change my environment. I have to do something different.
Yep. Yeah, because that's what I heard a guy say a couple of weeks ago. He said basically, you can change your environment, but if you don't change your mindset, then what you're doing, basically.
Exactly.
So everything around you can change. God can make everything around you Candyland if He wanted to, but if your mindset is still where it was, then what's gonna happen? You're still gonna be the same person. You're not gonna move any differently than what you was doing. So. You know what I mean? So that's our thing. Now, I want to ask this question real quick. And, we talk about this, and, they hate when I say this, but I ain't going to say the name. But when dealing with mental health, can you tell, in your years' experience, can you tell if a person is faking and you just kind of go along with it just to kind of see where this going to go?
Oh,
You know what I'm saying? So, certain people, we talk about, well, we could say this. We talk about the Kanye Wests, we talk about the Ben Simmons and people like that. I don't know if you're familiar with these people. I know you're familiar with Kanye West, but I don't know if you like Ben Simmons and all these people. And I'm like, something about it just don't feel right to me and all that. They're not them specifically, but I'm just saying when you see situations where, because I don't know, I'm not close to the situation to know if they're faking or if they just want attention. But when you see those in your world, how do you approach it differently, if anything, when you see it, when you like, I feel like this person is really putting on, but it's something else going on here?
Okay. So one of the things working in a rehab, we get clients in there who are definitely attention seek all the time. And and part of that is due to them not necessarily ever having anybody who loved them or cared about them or any of those things. So getting them to a place where to understand that that's not happening. For example, we had a client who didn't want to go to group. And when he doesn't want to do something, sometimes he wants to fake a seizure. And just one of these days, he was being told to go to group. And he was like, I don't feel good, this, that, and the other. So he started walking, acting like he was having a real hard time. And we had seen, and he's a return client, and we had seen him do this a couple times. And we just looked at him and was like, you know what? That's not working today. It's not working at all. And instantly he stopped. So it always goes back to who the client is. Sometimes you have to coddle some people, and sometimes you can call them out. But it's based on not just the client, but who you are and your relationship with that person.
Got
Yeah.
you.
Okay, so the last but not least, man, depression in the education system. You know, when it comes to our children, you know what I mean. When it comes to the students, I know you've seen that probably a lot, and I know it can be some can be more severe than others. How do you get what you need out of those kids to be open and honest with you about what's really going on?
Again, you have to be open. Just like with the therapist, the teacher's job is to be open, because I'm not going to reach every student the same way, especially when you're talking to a school, when you're talking about elementary school, middle school, or even high school. You can't just go in there with the thought process of, I'm just here to teach. This is my lesson plan, and I'm going to get up here and I'm going to put this on the board. Because guess what? Every student in your class don't learn the same way. So I may have to go over the same lesson 3 different ways, or break it down 3 different ways to try to make sure that everybody gets it. And in that process, if I know that little Susie struggles, I may have to call on little Susie or pull her over to the side afterwards and say, hey, how's everything going?
I'm glad you said that, because I had a discussion with a friend of mine, and he was like, man, you ever went in the classroom and just sat there? Like, maybe you had to come and sit with your kid. They wasn't acting up, but they wanted you to see something. And they allowed you to sit in the classroom, and then you think about, man, we was taught totally different. You know, she would, like, our teacher would teach it 3 different ways, man.
And here's the thing. It's not to cut you off, but here's the thing. We were taught, when I went going to school, when I came home, my mama said 2 + 2 is 4, the same way my teacher taught me 2 + 2 is 4. Not too long ago, my kids is in high school. I graduated high school now, but that was being taught math in a way that I wasn't taught math.
I know.
So how was I supposed to come home? How was they supposed to come home and get any type of support when you done changed up the way that you're teaching these kids? And then they're telling them that the way that we're teaching them is wrong because it's not the way you're teaching them. We're not congruent at all. So the way that we learn is being told that it's wrong to teach our kids that way. But the way that they want us to teach our kids, we haven't been taught. So to reinforce the education that they're being given in school, we almost have to go back to school with them to be able to reinforce what the teachers are teaching them, because it's not the same stuff that we were taught.
Right.
You're supposed to get the same answers, but it's a totally different type of situation. And then looking at the situation now and what they're being taught is they're not necessarily being taught the life skills that they need. Like, they're being spoon-fed information, but they're not necessarily being taught the life skills that they need. Most of them, parents are so busy working to provide because the cost of living is so high that they're not at home teaching kids how to be able to cook necessarily. They got those quick food, DoorDash, the whole 9 right now. They're not being taught how to manage a checkbook. They're not being taught how to go to a grocery store and how to get the 5 for $25 and make that 5 for $25 last for a whole week, and to divide that pack of hamburger up into 2 meals.
Hey, yeah, you said a mouthful. Hey, and so, but last but not least, and this is a question that people look at me like I'm crazy when I ask, and I was like, "Don't you care?" Like, I say, so I think and I believe, and I'm gonna ask you this question: do you think that there need to be a therapist in every school? No matter where it is, all across the globe.
No, most definitely, and not just one. There needs to be several. But they need to understand that a therapist's job would necessarily be just to teach kids how to cope, but to give them that support that they're missing out on. You know, people think that the therapist's job is to tell you how to live your life. Nope, I can't do that. Because at the end of the day, when you go home, you're going to do stuff that I don't even agree with. And that's okay. My job is to help you overcome some obstacles and then give you that third person. Because here's the real deal truth about that. I don't live your life. I'm not invested in your life. The decisions that you make when you go home are not necessarily going to affect me, right? So therefore, any information that I give you or my opinion that I give you is based off of what you give information that you tell me, not about how I feel about the situation or how it's going to turn out. Versus if I'm your wife or your girlfriend or something, any decision you make is going to affect me. As a therapist, I'm basically your sounding board. I'm there to help you on your journey to figure out how to overcome and get to wherever your goal is the best way possible. So if you're an addict, my job is to help you figure out how to stop being an addict, overcome the obstacles in your way, and to help you get out that situation.
Right.
Sometimes that means real quick, I just talked about this the other day in group. So let's say you're an addict, but your biggest stressor that causes you to relapse is finances, right? So let's say you go to work, but then when the bills come, because you don't know how to manage your money, you get stressed out. And because you stressed out, you want to go get high, right? Well, most people would just say, well, I'm going to teach you, you're going to go to rehab, you're going to get clean, I'm going to teach you how to be sober. No, that's not what you need. What you need is for me to teach you how to manage your finances properly, to be able to budget so you don't get stressed out, so you don't want to go use. The stress is what's making you want to go use. If I teach you how to manage that stress, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to eliminate the craving and the trigger for your use.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question, as you said that about the schools. So when you go to a school in Detroit, Michigan, at your average school, how many counselors in that school? And it'd be, let's say, among maybe, I don't know, 600, 700, 800, 1,000 kids. How many counselors usually on averages in that school?
Well, let me just say, I've been in Kentucky for 20 years, so I haven't been to Detroit public schools in a long time. But I worked in Kentucky public schools. And so let me say that when I went into a school, there were school counselors there, but there's a difference between a school counselor and a therapist.
Okay.
So the school counselor they're more about the education and giving them that guidance on what classes they need to take and how to reach those certain goals. There's not a mental health therapist counselor in that school.
Okay. So now, let
me expand on that further.
Okay.
Because there's not a mental health counselor in that school, when you walk into that school, you got people suffering from depression, anxiety, who are being bullied, who have all these other issues happening, right? So you have a school of, let's say, 500 students. Of those 500 students, you got 300 students that are dealing with some depression, some anxiety, some type of mental health issue, and some type of substance abuse. There is nobody identifying that or helping that in that situation. And here's the other aspect. Let's say that you were out of one of those kids, you're the one that's being bullied, right? Guess what? When you go and you tell somebody about that child being bullied, they don't necessarily get the support that they need to overcome that bullying, because there's not necessarily going to be a punishment for the other person doing that.
And that's after they said no bullying.
Right.
No, the bullying is not tolerated, zero tolerance on bullying, but they don't live by their own phrase they came up with.
So it's not, guess what? So going to school for me, going back to the COVID and the pandemic and everything else, so going to school for me is not necessarily a safe place. Increases my anxiety, increases my depression. And then because I connect to nobody there, or nobody's really supporting me if I'm not clicked up. I'm just there. And because the teacher doesn't have enough resources, they don't have enough time to dedicate to teaching me, because guess what? They got 30, 40, 50 students, 30, 40 students in their classroom, and they're trying to teach a lesson a particular way, because guess what? their students get tested, a standardized test. And if they don't reach a certain score, the teachers are penalized for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the time that I should be devoting to my students to make sure they get it and then maybe see those red flags and how much support and help they need, I'm not giving. But more is being added to me every day. And there is no, and going back, there's school psychologists, but there's one psychologist for maybe 4 or 5 schools.
Wow.
And we have these things called the 504 plans or the IEP plans, which basically they come in, they tell the parent what things are wrong with their students and what they're going to do. But nobody actually takes the time to sit down and make sure that those things are being done upon. Everybody agrees upon it, but nobody's really taking the time to make sure it's being done. And then they tell the students, hey, you have to ask for it.
Question for you.
You're a child, you got to ask for it, and you're a child.
Exactly. You got to ask for it. You got to advocate for it.
Wow.
Question, that IEP, that's the name of it? So what happens is, because I did some research on this, because, I know some parents that got some kids, that have this situation. So what they do in the bigger cities is if a kid is on the IEP, they have what you call a follower in the school with their kid. But for the smaller schools, they don't hire the followers because they don't have the budget for the followers.
Yep. Or they put them all in the same room.
Right.
And dedicate one or two instructional assistants to help out with those students. But I got a room of 10 or 15 special privileged students, but it's only 2 of us in here.
Right.
You know what's crazy that my kids had told me, and I didn't even realize this, but they're out of high school now. But they was telling me when they were in school that it was kind of a flip. It was like things had flipped. So he was telling me, he was like, basically the kids when he was in school, they didn't pick on kids who didn't have Jordans and didn't have the latest fashion. They picked on kids that wasn't trying to be like them. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. He said, if you actually came with the Jordans and you came looking more stylish than everybody else, the kids actually frowned on you more because it's like you think you better than us. Versus when we were in school, if you didn't have the latest fashion, then you got frowned on, even though really most parents couldn't afford it, but they killed themselves to make sure you had some of the latest stuff. So
everybody gets bullied in high school. Everybody, if you're a cheerleader, you're getting bullied because you're a popular kid and everybody's supposed to be like you. If you, it doesn't. Everybody's getting bullied.
Wow.
Across the board about something. There is somebody talking trash about you at some point.
So is that a form of bullying?
Yeah. And here's the thing: it's always been there. Bullying has been there since when we were coming to school. It's just harsher now because at least when we left to go home from school, it stopped. You were at least safe at home unless your parents or your home environment was messed up. But guess what? These phones and computers and everything else now, you're not you're not just being bullied at home. You're being bullied at school and everywhere else. So what escape do I have? And then because of the bullying, now the way I look at myself, my own self-preservation, my own thought process of how I see myself is skewed. And because I've been told I'm not ugly, or I'm told I'm fat, or I'm told I'm this, or I'm told I'm that, and now I'm on social media and I don't see myself or my self-representation, I fall into that.
Yeah.
So what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
There's nobody that looks like me. There's nobody that talks like me. And my differences are being pointed out because I don't fit in.
And you said something very key. We gotta let you go after this, but you said something very key when you said everybody's being bullied, and me and Jacob talk about this all the time. Why is there such a rise in mental health with youth? And when you said that every high school player, every high school person is getting bullied in some form of fashion, and I never looked at it like that because when we were in school, like you said, you didn't really notice it. You just thought the popular kids were the popular kids, and these kids were these kids. So only people that's only getting bullied as the ones that look weird or to everybody else or whatever the case may be, or look like they come from poverty or whatever the case may be. Those were the kids were getting bullied. You know what I'm saying? Or the little scrawny kid or whatever it was. And you saying, no, it's everybody, because even the kids that maybe be in poverty world or whatever they got going on over here, they picking on the popular kids because they like, well, shoot, I'm gonna use my mouth or whatever it is or to talk about you too. So, and in their mind, they may walk around like they confident, but in their mind, they like, oh wow, everybody's supposed to love me and they don't. You know what I'm saying? So but I want to thank you for coming on this morning, giving us your time. And so if anybody can reach you, where can they reach you at, or whatever, if they need any help, assistance, or knowledge on what you do and what you got going on.
You can find me on Facebook on Williams Counseling Center.
Okay. All right, Jacob, you got anything else for this young lady?
I just want to thank you for coming on, and blessings to you on your journey, and just keep doing what you're doing, because it's so many of us that need people like you, and it takes patience, it takes time, it takes commitment, it takes dedication, and it takes the Spirit of God to do what you do. So appreciate you for coming on.
Well, thank you all for having me. Y'all have a blessed day.
You too.
You as well.
And everybody else, I want to thank all the fans for coming on, chiming with us on this morning. Check us out in the morning, 910 Sports, 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:15 in the morning. See y'all next time.
We got the good vibe, got the 1942 pouring in my cup.